Okay, you sorry sapsuckers, Fear Street 1994, it's better than you think it is, okay? At least I loved it to death. So we're going to talk some quick spoilers before we jump into Fear Street 1978. So anyway, Fear Street 1994, spoilers, let's go. What's up, guys? This is going to be more of a laid-back video. It's a little bit too late, but I wanted to do a spoiler review for Fear Street 1994. Don't you love it when a show comes along, or I guess a movie, that completely surprises you? Because I went into this thinking it was going to be one of those teeny bopper, almost like CW type slasher films. I guess kind of like Scream Queens and stuff like that. And it's definitely some of that, but I really just loved how everything came together in this. I'm a big slasher fan, and the kills in this were very good, but I also really just liked the story. I liked the blending of subgenres, because it's a slasher, of course, but you had this witch by the name of Sarah Fear that was kind of the puppet master of the whole thing and creating these dead slasher killers throughout. So looking forward to just kind of going through this movie one more time and really just breaking down a lot of the spoilery type stuff that I really dug about it. And by the way, there was a couple people in the comments that thought I gave away too much in my review, but I thought, you know, me talking about Sarah the Witch was fair game in a non-spoiler review, because that's established pretty early on in the movie. Also, I think there's two types of spoilers you can give. There's a spoiler that actually makes the experience even better, and then there's the big spoilers, like say the end of the movie, that can completely ruin the movie for some people. I am a person that hates big spoilers in movies, okay? But the reason I mentioned The Witch was because I just thought it would give you guys a little bit more to go on when you went into this movie. You know, just trying to set the scale of how different this is than a normal slasher movie. I guess I could have been a little bit more secretive, but I just figured that would be something that would make you say, ooh, I want to watch it more, than, ooh, you've given me too much. But anyway, jumping into the very first scene, this was just a big homage to Scream, the opening scene. Now, I have talked to people that are fans of the Fear Street novels, and there's quite a few of you out there. And doing my own research too, I found that the novels are very far removed from this movie, or these three movies. These three movies aren't specifically rooted in the novels, like one specific novel. Like there's no Fear Street 1994 novel. But anyway, jumping into that opening scene, I mean, I just got so many Scream vibes from this scene. You got Ryan Torres, this guy that Sarah, we know now, she basically possessed his dead body into becoming a slasher killer. I liked his getup too with the skull mask and all that. But it's a nice little stalking scene too. You got Heather, who is Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman's daughter, really making a name for herself these days. But just the way she was killed in that scene, it almost paralleled the scene with Drew Barrymore at the beginning of Scream. And just to jump onto the music a little bit, because I found out after I reviewed it that it was, in fact, Marco Beltrami who did the score for the whole movie. Which I thought it might have been a little bit more interesting to just make this section the Marco Beltrami, because it just felt like, you know, this whole little section was Scream. The rest of the movie, not as much. You know, of course it did have a little bit of that Millennium Slasher feel to it, but it just didn't feel like a Scream ripoff. I heard some people say that this was a Scream ripoff. No, there's a difference between an homage and a ripoff. The opening scene was clearly an homage, and if you can't see that, then you're crazy. But I think where the confusion lies is they maintained Beltrami's score throughout the rest of the movie, and it does sound very similar, if not identical, to that of Scream. And since we're talking about music, this is called 1994. I think the handling of the music, as far as like positioning and where you put it and how much of the music you play, was really sloppy. There were some scenes where it just felt like too many songs were being thrown at you, and it's like by the time you caught up to what the song was, another song was starting to play, and you're like, oh, that song, and then, oh, that song, and it just kind of got a little bit too force-fed. Great songs, but I think they just needed to space them out more. You know, it's almost like, hey, this is the 90s, so let's get excited and put out all these 90s songs that everybody's gonna love. It's gonna be like a 90s greatest hits, you know? And I'm sure the Fear Street soundtrack 1994 is gonna be great, but I just didn't like the positioning of the songs in the movie. It really felt kind of front-loaded too. I felt like there were a lot more songs in the first half of the movie than the second half of the movie. I even heard some people stating that this is 1994 and there were some songs that were after 94, so it didn't really belong in that year, but that doesn't really bother me anyway. Now, for most of this movie, it focused on the relationship between Dina and Sam, this high school relationship. These are kids that look like they're, 16 years old, 15 years old, and there's some pretty racy stuff in here as far as like, make-out scenes and whatnot. It made me think back to like the 90s, and they probably wouldn't get away with showing as much as they did in this movie that's actually set in the 90s, but I'm sure that stuff did happen in real life, so it was kind of refreshing to see that. But it is kind of awkward to see actors that, let's face it, they look like kids, and they're having pretty racy scenes with each other. But that scene was padded with some nice comedy thanks to the character Simon, talking about how everybody, did you guys just go to Pound Town? And I did too, and he was by himself. Wink, wink. Hey, whatever you got to do, right? But I really loved throughout this movie just getting to know all these characters, which I did like quite a bit. Exploring all these different killers throughout, because you did have the sackhead killer, and then you had this seductive killer, Ruby Lane, who had like an eye missing. Just a lot of different flavors in terms of killers. And of course, the current killer, Ryan Torres. But also, this did not hold back in kills. I think we get the best kills in the last part, but not just the nature of the kills, but also just the shock value of them, because these were two main characters. This was Kate and Simon, and you did not expect them to die at all, because this seemed like a group of kids that are in it together. They're gonna make it out to the end, and that's not what happened at all. I was shocked at both of their deaths, and they were so close to each other. I mean, within like a minute of each other. You have Kate that is put on this meat grinder, and she just violently pushed through this the grinder, and her head just like splits open. And then directly after that, while you're processing all this, you get Simon, who gets an axe straight to the head. Pretty crazy stuff. That was just a big part of why I loved this so much. I like stories where characters that we end up loving end up getting killed. This is like Game of Thrones type stuff. I'm not saying this movie is as good as Game of Thrones, no, but what I'm just saying is I like that shock value, that surprise. And then finally, the very end of the movie. You think we've wrapped up everything. Of course, we've had some deaths and everything, but Sam is pretty much the final girl, and she's made it throughout this whole thing. She had to die to basically save herself, to keep the witch from coming after her, but it didn't work, and she ended up becoming Sarah Fier's next killer. And I'm just curious where they're gonna go with that in 78. I'm really curious, actually. And that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in terms of spoilers with 94. Gonna be watching 78 in a couple nights. And then I'll probably do a non-spoiler and a spoiler review for that as well. Really excited though. So let me know your thoughts again on 94. Did you guys watch it more than once? Have you liked it even more? I've only watched it once still. My schedule's way too busy, but looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays we do Free for Fridays. Follow my Drumdums on all my socials. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Drumdum out.